You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Welcome to The Open Door, a show based on the words in Revelation, "I have left an open door before you, which no one can close." This is WCAT Radio's longest-running show, which opened the door to the radio station in October 2016. It's currently offered by Jim Hanink, Mario Ramos-Reyes and friends, and remains open to the love of God in its call to build a culture of life and a just social order through the panel's discussion of the Catholic social teaching principles of solidarity, subsidiarity, and economic democracy. The Open Door also explores nonviolence, distributism, and communitarianism. So join us at the Open Door, where you too can be part of the conversation.
Welcome to the Open Door. Jim Hanink here with co-host Mario Ramos-Reyes. Today we discuss an extraordinary murder mystery. Virgil Gheorghiu's La Condottiera. La Condottiera is the tale of a heinous crime set amid the terrible suffering of the Romanian people under communism. Gheorghiu's language is starkly poetic as he charts the circles of a modern hell. Her translation of this powerful work, Inez Fitzgerald Storck, truly contributes to world literature. Two special guests, we are hoping, though they come from afar, will join her to offer us a mini seminar. Iuliu-Marius Morariu, Father Maxim, a Romanian Orthodox priest, holds a PhD in Orthodox Theology from Babeș-Bolyai University in Romania and a PhD in Social Sciences from Rome's Angelicum Pontifical University. Thierry Gillyboeuf is Gheorghiu's literary executor and the author of Virgil Gheorghiu, L'Écrivain calomnié. Excuse my French, it's not even high school. It's just made up as I go along. In 2014, the French Minister of Culture named Gillyboeuf a Chevalier des Arts et des Lettres in honor of his literary achievements. Let's begin in prayer, as we always do. Come, O Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, and enkindle in them the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. O God, who has taught the hearts of the faithful, by the light of the Holy Spirit, grant that by the gift of the same Spirit, we may be always truly wise and ever rejoice in his consolation through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Let's begin with a starter question, although a full answer would be a very long answer indeed. Inez, could you tell us about Virgil Gheorghiu's multifaceted life, especially its early influences?
Yes, he grew up the son of a Romanian Orthodox priest. As our listeners know, the Orthodox can be married before ordination. And on both sides of his family, the priesthood goes back for generations. His father was a very, very saintly man. They lived in penury. His father was dedicated to his church. And Gheorghiu grew up in the atmosphere of spirituality. It was like the air he breathed. He himself wanted to be a priest, as this was almost to be expected, being the son of the priest, but he took this vocation to heart and wanted to pursue it. But his parents did not have the money to send him to the seminary. So his father thought that the best opportunity for a free education was to go to a military academy. He had a tutor prepare Gheorghiu intensively for the entrance exam, because out of hundreds and hundreds of people, only a handful were accepted. So they had to go to Chisinau, the capital of, it was then Bessarabia, a part of Romanian Moldova. Now it's the communists took it over, and it's now the Republic of Moldova. But then it was very much Romania. And he succeeded in the exam, and after a while got a scholarship. So he embarked on this intensive military education. Even then, he sensed his vocation to be a poet. He wrote many poems for the student magazine and even for other publications. So when he was still a teenager, his poetry began to be known. Then when he finished his military education, he deferred his military service and went to work as a reporter. Then when he was called up for military service, they made him a war reporter. At that time, the Romanians were trying to drive the Soviets out of Bessarabia, and they were allies of the Germans. This would later come back to haunt Gheorghiu, that he fought together with the Germans, but the Germans were warding off the Russians. So he did a lot of war reportage. He was criticized because in getting from one place to another inside Bessarabia to get to the front, he was helped by the Germans, by a few German soldiers, and he had words of praise for these soldiers that helped him. He himself was not a fascist, but he had some detractors. Yeah. So he would have to ward off these accusations of anti-Semitism, actually, for the rest of his life. And then he met a young lawyer, Ekaterina Borbea, in the course of his reporting, and they developed a strong attraction and got married after a short courtship. Then Gheorghiu, because his wife was Jewish, he was deprived of his press credentials when the fascists had taken over Romania. So he, through some connections, was named the cultural attaché in Zagreb, Croatia. Then when the Soviets entered Romania to take it over, he and his wife decided to flee. They were detained after a series of adventures. They were picked up by the Americans, and because he had worked for a fascist government, he was detained in American camps for a year and a half. His wife also. He was in more than a dozen camps, constantly going from one to the other. So when he writes about this in his work, about these camps, he has firsthand experience. And they were able to enter France illegally, and then he settled in Paris and began to write. So the early influences, I guess, would be the great spirituality of the Romanian people, in particular his father, his mother's love of poetry too. Thierry is saying he has a problem with his camera. His mother wrote a lot of poetry. It's a prayer. She prayed through poems. And his love of Romania, which was, it's hard for us as Americans to realize the connection between, I'm sure the Romanians weren't the only ones in Europe who felt a very strong connection to their country. When Bessarabia was taken over by the Russians, it was like the country had been amputated. Part of it had been amputated. And there was national mourning. Bells were tolling. Masses were said. So that love for Romania continued throughout his life.
Thank you very much for that background. Now, a guest who is the literary executor of Gheorghiu has been able to join us. He's having a little trouble with his video, but not any trouble with his audio. So I'm going to ask him to pick up with the account that you've given us and perhaps tell us something about the consequences of Gheorghiu's self-imposed exile from Romania. Well, we're here for you whenever you want to join in. But since you're having some technical difficulties, and don't we all, I'm going to ask Inez to continue and tell us about the consequences of, leaving Romania.
Well, I guess a major consequence was that Gheorghiu never wrote any poetry. Like it is in the Jewish psalm, we hung up our harps in exile. He could no longer write in poetry. So this must have been very difficult for him. His novels are very poetic, extremely poetic passages. But then one fortunate consequence was that since he had studied philosophy in Bucharest and theology in Heidelberg after he'd been released from the American camp, he and his wife spent some time in Heidelberg, he was able to be ordained a Romanian Orthodox priest in Paris. And as I mentioned, he was wrongly accused of fascism, and this caused a lot of controversy. He was able to have his bestseller published, The 25th Hour, where the hero spends time in concentration camps of various countries, including Nazis, and over a period of more than 10 years has enormous sufferings. This was one of the first times that the European public had been aware of what was going on. The French at the time had a lot of pro-communist sympathies. Sartre, for example, thought that it was almost criminal not to be pro-communist, at least for a time. So Gabriel Marcel had written a preface to the 25th Hour, and when Gheorghiu refused to clarify his position, Marcel withdrew his preface. And this wounded Gheorghiu very deeply. And he felt so much pressure in France. Part of it was because the translator of the 25th Hour, a Romanian, there was a conflict about what she would be paid for the translation. He paid what he had said, but since it became an international bestseller, she thought she was due more money, so she took him to court. And when she lost, she started taking things he had written out of context and accused him of being a fascist. So Gheorghiu and his wife went to Argentina for a time. This only added fuel to the fire because he met with Perón, who was not seen in a good light by the French. And he finally came back and was able to continue his writing career and very much functioning as a priest, giving talks. So those are some of the consequences. If he had stayed in Romania, he probably never would have been able to be ordained a priest.
Mario, would you like to join us? When I hear of someone going to South America, I think that you probably have that context very clearly in mind.
Well, yes. I still remember when I read that La Hora 25, the 25th hour, was very well known in Latin America. I'm talking about the 80s. But you said that Gheorghiu went to Argentina during the Perón era. That may have been between 48 and 55. Am I right?
Right. It would have been in the early 50s.
Early 50s. Okay. And the reason why he was there was he went there as an exile.
Well, the atmosphere in France was getting to be very oppressive with the accusations against him the hate mail he received, the articles in the paper, and he was invited by a Catholic group to give some lectures there. So he went there to give the lectures, but also to kind of get a break from the oppressive atmosphere in France.
Now, to be more precise, the group who invited him was, let's say, ideologically, what type of group do you know about that in Argentina?
I really don't know what type of group. All I know is that their primary affiliation was Catholic, but actually Gheorghiu met with Perón. He recounts this in an autobiographical novel, The Man Who Traveled Alone, and it's very thinly veiled. But Perón was a big admirer of his. He liked the 25th hour. And Gheorghiu didn't mind meeting with him. He, I don't think, was a Peronist. And then there were consequences when that became known.
Thierry says he would like to add to this answer. Thierry is currently in Paris, is he not?
That's where he lives. By the way, in his book about Gheorghiu, the slandered writer, he goes in some detail to the accusations against Gheorghiu and their consequences, as well as giving an excellent summary of all the works of Gheorghiu. It's been a very helpful work for me to have.
Excellent. Could you tell us, Inez, about the full range of genres that Gheorghiu's work encompasses?
Yes, first it was poetry, and he wrote a work, Calligraphy on the Snow, which was awarded a prize that he received from the hands of King Carol in Romania.
That's a fantastic title.
I like it too.
Wow.
Yes, I wish it had been translated into English. I haven't been able to get a copy of it even in Romanian. But anyway, and then, of course, the war reportage. He wrote a book about his experiences in Bessarabia. The banks of the Dniester River, that is, are in flames. He was on a submarine. Romania had one submarine, and is a reporter, and that submarine was attacked by the Soviets, and it survived. So he wrote a book about that. And then he wrote kind of a forerunner of the 25th hour that he realized wasn't quite the novel he had hoped for, and that never got a lot of resonance. Then when in Germany, he published some Romanian tales that were translated into German. Then when he got to France, his literary career really took off. With the 25th Hour, he wrote a number of other novels. He wrote biographies. He went to Arabia and learned Arabic, researching the life of Muhammad. And he wrote a book about Muhammad, written as though a Muslim might have written it. But if you don't share that point of view, you would see what the weak points are in that system of thought. He wrote a book about the young Dr. Luther, and a wonderful book about the patriarch Athenagoras, who met with Pope Paul VI, and they lifted their mutual excommunications. And that's just a fascinating work where he talks about this holy patriarch. And one interesting thing about that is that when Athenagoras was first named a bishop, he went to a port city, and there were some prostitutes there. He went directly to the home of the prostitutes, talked to them, offered to find them jobs, emptied out the brothel, and really rehabilitated them. That's just an aside. But then his main work was novels, and of course he wrote his memoirs.
Well, we finally, and thank you for that, we finally made our connection with Thierry, and he's ready to have his say on all the questions that he's heard us discuss so far. So I turn the floor over to him.
Hello, everybody. I'm speaking from France. I'm sorry for my deep French accents, but
well, you've heard my non-French, and it must have hurt your ears.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, I will still speak in English. I wanted to go back to Argentina and explain there were many reasons for Gheorghiu to go to Argentina. Of course, there was the turmoil of the Gheorghiu's affair, the accusations. But when he was in the American jails after the war, Eva Perón was the one who sent some package to all the prisoners in the camps. And he remembered this. And he was very, very, very popular in South America. And he was invited by Perón himself. And at the beginning, I think he spent some time in the presidential palace, and I think he was to write a biography of Perón. The purpose of the invitation was this: he had to write a biography of Perón, and there was also a friend of him were living in Argentina. The name is Vintila Oria, is a Romanian writer. They were born the same year, and they died the same year too. And they were close friends from the youth in Romania. And Vintila Oria fled to Argentina because he was more involved in the right-wing movement in Romania during the war. And Vintila Oria won the Goncourt in 1962, something like this. He had to refuse to deny the Goncourt because he was accused to be an anti-Semitist and to be someone of the right way, far right wing. And the same accusation as Gheorghiu, but for Vintila Oria, it's more true. This is the reason why Gheorghiu has to fly, wanted to spend some time in Argentina. And as Inez said, at the end of his life, when I met him, at the end of his life, Gheorghiu wanted to write his memoir. And at the beginning, there would have been 7 volumes of these memoirs. Unfortunately, he died before. He only wrote the first one, and he left the manuscript for the second one. His widow issued it about 6 or 7 years after his death, and then that's all. And unfortunately, the second volume ends with Gheorghiu and his wife arriving in France. And the third one would have been very, very interesting because the third one would have been about his beginnings in Paris and the success of the 25th hour, and after this, maybe the Gheorghiu's affair. But you can, as Inez said, the third volume of the memoirs is, in fact, his novel, The Man Who Traveled Alone, because it's his life. It's exactly what he has to go through during all these years. So Gheorghiu was the man I met, and I was close to during 6 years or 7 years. Was someone very, very lovely and very funny and very kind. But he's someone I have all these letters and diaries and something like this in my home since I'm the owner of his right, and was someone a little bit more intricate that I guess at the beginning, and he wanted to be someone famous. He needed it. It's not a shame, but he needed it, and I think that sometimes he made some mistakes. That's just a point, because he was just a man, so a man with qualities and with his defaults. He was just a man, but someone very, very interesting. And I think that the affair of Gheorghiu is something very, very, very intricate. The extracts from the book they put in French to accuse him are very, very the book is very, very, very strange to read. I must confess, because George was a reporter of war, and he couldn't. He should have known what happened in Iași, for example. So there's something very strange for me. But the accusators of George are very, very early people. I can say like they did the same with. I don't know if you know this man, with Kravchenko.
Thierry,
who was a dissident.
Thierry, excuse me.
Yes.
This has all been extremely helpful, and we'll be coming back to you very, very shortly. But our panelist, co-host, Mario Ramos-Reyes, unfortunately, has to go to meetings. So before he goes to any meetings, I want to ask him if he would like to interject any questions here.
Okay.
Well, I think it's very, very, very interesting, very illustrative. I didn't know that he was asked to write a biography of Perón. But yes. But the issue is, if I understood well, Eva Perón was the one who was first in contact with him. Am I right with that?
Yes, in contact with him as a prisoner. When he was a prisoner in the American jails, the only things he got from the outside was it was the package sent by Eva Perón to all the prisoners.
Okay. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I had to leave. I have a few educational commitments.
Opportunities.
Thank you. See you later. Good.
All right. And now we can welcome Father Maxim.
Thank you. I'm glad to see you. Sorry for the delay, because I had a liturgy. I just had finished the liturgy and I came running. I'm Iuliu-Marius, in fact, on your screen, so I will rename it.
Well, clearly you have the right priorities. Now, our programs, Father, are conversational. And on more than one occasion, the conversation has been interrupted by our trying to connect with people, and it works, but it doesn't quite work, and then it works very well. And all of these things will be dealt with brilliantly by our producer, Sebastian Mahfoud, who cuts and splices and does all sorts of marvelous things. So I'm going to ask you to join in at this point of the discussion. But if you work your way back, whether deliberately or indeliberately, that's just fine. Our focus is on the novel that Inez has translated, and as I understand it, it's only the second of Gheorghiu's novel that has been translated into English. Could you tell us something about this novel, La Condottiera, and its place in the other novels that English readers won't have access to? Could you tell us a little bit about this novel and where it fits in the work of Gheorghiu?
Thank you for the question. As you may know, Virgil Gheorghiu wrote more than 40 novels, and at least a few years ago, when it has been translated into Romanian language, Condottiera was considered among the unpublished novels of Virgil Gheorghiu. So it's a great joy that it was translated in English, and in the very, very beautiful English language, because I must confess, I followed step by step the translation that Miss Inez did it, and I was very happy with the way how she understood the senses and the theological meaning of this novel. Virgil Gheorghiu is a writer which still waits to be discovered. He was translated in more than 40 languages, but the translations focused on 25th Hours, who was the masterpiece of the author, and who was screened in 1967, if I remember well, with Anthony Quinn as main character. So Condottiera is among the books that he wrote lately. 25th Hour was published in 1948 in Feu Croisé in France at Plone. And Condottiera is already one of the books that he published late in the 70s when he was already old and he was in the apogee, if this word exists in English, I'm not quite sure, of his career. For this reason, most probably it was not translated. Unfortunately, Gheorghiu was not translated in English after 25th Hour for reasons that are related with his conflict with Monica Lovinescu and Virgil Gheorghiu, an important family of the Romanian exile from France, that in a certain point accused him to be an anti-Semite and really managed by cutting some paragraphs of his works and somehow transforming him in a man who was an anti-Semite. At the time, Gheorghiu didn't react. As a real Orthodox priest, he didn't react. In fact, he will become later. As a real Orthodox, he didn't react to this accuse that it has been offered to him. No, it was, for example, it would be just simple to say that he was married with a Jew woman, because Caterina Burbeș-Bolyai, she was a Jew woman, and he had a lot of suffering due to this fact from the legionary government. For this reason, he had to leave Romania, to arrive to Zagreb, and to work in an embassy. While he was a very known writer in Romania, he received the Royal Prize for poetry, and he was so known. So I'm very glad that somehow with this Condottiera, which is a mystical novel, I would say, although it has a historical content, very interesting, because you can see here paragraphs from the life of Nikifor Crainic, who, for example, was one of the most important philosophers from the Romanian interwar period. Unfortunately, he's also not translated in other languages, but he studied in German space, and probably for this reason, he's somehow neglected by the literary criticism and by the philosophers up to this moment. So on the other side, it contains references to the life of Wurmbrand, because Gheorghiu speaks there about the fact that the Romanian Securitate was sailing people on a fee of $10,000 and was noticing on the fee that there were fruits and vegetables sold for this amount. So it was something related with Wurmbrand that Gheorghiu was at the time for sure informed about. But in the same time, it is a novel with a very, very deep mystical content, because Gheorghiu here presents Condottiera. It's in fact a metaphor for the Virgin Mary, and Gheorghiu presents here among other aspects that are related with the recent history of the Romania, because this is the beauty of the Gheorghiu's writing. Gheorghiu always presented the history of his native country, but in the same time noticing the fact that it was a moment when the theology must be taken into account. So in the same time, he's presenting the way how the mystical experience and the fact of being Christians interferes with the communism, and not in a very good way. This can be seen in about probably 38 from 44 books that Gheorghiu published during his life, or wrote during his life, because not all of them are published. It's now after his death that Mr. Gillyboeuf arrived to invite the publishing houses to publish all the work of Gheorghiu, because there were a few novels who still are unpublished at the moment. So for this reason, I'm very happy, because on one side, you will find here a historical novel related with the recent history of Romania, with the history of Romania in the 20th century. And in the same time, it's related with the way how the Christianity influenced the way of thinking of the Romanian people. Gheorghiu was the son of a priest, and his father was his model of his life. He even wrote about him. In fact, in France, it was published, this novel, I think is De la 20e heure à l'heure éternelle, which in Romanian was translated with the title From the 25th Hour to the Hour of Eternity, which is dedicated to the history of his father. And this is somehow how he was brought to the fact of becoming father, because he was influenced by his father, by the way how his father lived his priesthood and was somehow a really, really shepherd of souls. So for this reason, I like this novel, La Condottiera, because in the same time, and more deeply than other books, speaks about the way how the politics come to speak to a country that have deep Christian roots and fails, because having deep Christian roots make you to have this possibility to resist to the ideologizations that often can come from politics. And this was one of the points of my thesis, my second doctorate thesis, that I wrote it in Rome in the Angelicum Pontifical University.
That's a lot of context for us. Thank you very much. Now, I have 3 points that I'm raising with a certain hesitancy because I'm a Westerner. And not only am I a Westerner, but I'm from Los Angeles. And in Spanish, I refer to Los Angeles as La Ciudad de los Ángeles Casi Perdidos, the city of almost lost angels. And all of the points or the questions that I'm going to raise connect only with La Condottiera. The first is, and I guess I'm going to take them in what I see as the order of importance. The first is that there is, to this reader, an extraordinarily sharp break between the natural and the supernatural. For example, when I read the essays of Pope John Paul II, he suggests that what we build that is good in this world of ours is drawn into the world to come. And it seems to me that there's a kind of recognition, of course, that the kingdom of God is not on earth, but nonetheless, that what we build here on earth has an enduring value. And when I read La Condottiera, I wondered about that sharp division that I saw. That's point number one. And I can remember it even if everybody else forgets it, because I'm going to introduce two more points. Point number two is that I see nothing of, and perhaps there was no possibility of, a political reaction, even if very much underground, to the Soviet occupation. I can imagine novels written, let's say, about the same time as La Condottiera in, say, South America, in which I would expect to find, or in France, in which I would expect to find some sense of some kind of political, even underground political response. What I do see in La Condottiera is the easy transition of the thugs among the people to the role of collaborators. And then the last point, and I certainly noticed this, there's a discussion of the woman, and I'm here referring to, I hope I have the name correct, Sabina, who actually inherited the mill which plays such a central role in the novel. Reference to the woman as somehow overwhelmingly enticing. And this is on the part of her brother-in-law, but also on the part of the poet, who at the end of the day manages to escape. And in his escape leads us to a discussion of how much the American response fails, even though it's a better position than that of the communist response. It nonetheless shares something of the bureaucratization and impersonalization of the communist response. So we've got 3 points. The role of the secular vis-a-vis the sacred, the nature of woman in the understanding that's presented of the Greek Romanian Orthodox spirituality, and the difficulty of, it seems, any kind of political response to the oppression. So if Inez or Father Maxime or Thierry, any one of you want to comment on any one of those points, I would appreciate that.
Well, in terms of the lack of a response to the communist takeover, there was a very tight security system, which Father Maxim knows a lot about. He actually examined Gheorghiu's secret police files that they had on him when he was in Paris. And actually, a spy came to his house from Romania secretly, which is fictionalized in the novel The Woman Who Was a Spy, not translated, lesbian. So I think that a lack of a response would hardly have been possible when so many people were informing on each other. There were threats if you didn't inform, but Father Maxim could tell us more about that.
Father, that's your cue.
Well, let's say that I've worked on his Securitate dossier in 2017 when I had a scholarship from the Romanian Institute for the Investigation of Communist Crime. And I was curious to see how the conflict between him and Monica Lovinescu was reflected in the Securitate archives. And I was worried about the fact, I confessed at the time to Mr. Gillyboeuf because I wrote both him and to Mr. Ciocioi, who's the Romanian translator of Father Gheorghiu's work, asking him for the permission to work on this topic and for help. And at the time, Mr. Gillyboeuf sent me 2 letters from Monica Lovinescu to Father Gheorghiu, where she confesses that she received money for the translation of the 25th hour, fact that she will never recognize. Now, going back to the Securitate dossiers, I would tell you that there are 3 dossiers, very consistent dossiers, about more than 150, some of them more than 250 pages. And at the time, there were about 8 people sent to follow him. Even this spy who presented herself as being one of his relatives, Gheorghiu was not very conscious of this moment, that she was not a relative, and she was sent to kill him. And at the time, there are a few notices about this. I didn't publish them because it was not my task at the time. At the time, I worked only on the conflict. And you know what that means when in a certain moment of their life, his father and his mother wanted to visit Gheorghiu. Father Gheorghiu was so scared about the fact they couldn't be their father or their mother, because he never saw his parents after 1940, when 42, I think, when he left for Zagreb. So for this reason, he actually was scared that they couldn't be his father and his mother. And in one of these letters, he told him, "No, please don't come. It's not, it's not the time to come. There will be a time." And in the next year, his father died. It was somewhere in 67 or 68. And it was a great, great loss for him. So this man suffered a lot for the Securitate. Securitate was always Romanian security, how we call it. Securitate was always interested in his work. And in a certain time, they tried to determine him to become one of informers, because he knew so many things. In a certain moment, this I must also notice, up to 64, if I remember well, to 1964, there was a dossier on the name of Virgil Gheorghiu, and the Securitate was fully convinced that Virgil Gheorghiu is still in Romania under a fake identity. And for this reason, he has so many information that he published in his books, because it was not possible to know so many things about the abuses made by the communist regime in order and to be outside of the country. So there was a Romanian national dossier of following Father Gheorghiu, and at the time they were trying to find him and to kill him, or at least to imprison him or to annihilate his activity. And his father suffered for this. His father was at the moment a priest somewhere in the Neamț county, which is in the eastern part of Romanian Moldavia, in the Romanian Moldavia of today. And it was very, very complicated. But for Father Gheorghiu, for example, it was not like for Monica Lovinescu or for others. For others, it was enough to say your mother is here, your father is here. If you are not telling what you are interested to say, we can kill them. He was never threatened by this fact. Even if he was threatened, he never ceased. So he stayed vertical from this point of view. And in fact, nothing happens because his father died in an old age. But he suffered because sometimes he was called to be inquired by the Securitate, and he was in. So it was difficult. But in the same time, it's interesting to see how Father Gheorghiu was informed, because there were moments when Father Gheorghiu knew before the Free Europe Radio or the Occident what happens in the communist period in relationship between the church and the state. And he had not a very good relationship with Patriarch Cristian Marina, although he had a correspondence on the time. But probably somewhere in his relationship with Monsignor Bârlea, for example, who was an important representative of the Romanian exile from Germany, or probably with others, due to his ecumenical relationships that he developed during his life, he was very well informed, and usually he had information previously to the other people, even to Monica Lovinescu, who was in Radio Free Europe and received anonymous letters from this. And he never ceased to valorize this in his books. For this reason, they tried at the time to invite him to Romania in order to imprison him in somewhere in the 70s. Afterwards, they tried to invite him to screen in Romania, to make the movie in Romania, but to give up with the anti-communist passages of 25th Hour, he refused. And then the last solution was to kill him, like it was for Paul Goma, in the same time for Virgil Tănase. There was, I would say, a general tendency of the Romanian Securitate to kill the opponents from the French exile. None of them, for example, in comparison with the Bulgarian Securitate, Romanian Securitate managed to kill nobody, and in the end there were even important officers from the Securitate like Pleșiță, who was general, or even the chief of the Security, I don't remember now his name, probably Mr. Gillyboeuf can help me, even defected, so switched the side and run away from the country. At the time, what Gheorghiu managed to show from the political and social-political point of view, geopolitical point of view, was to prove that Romania was at the time a penitentiary republic. And I think it was the main task of books like, not only like Condottiera, where he also speaks, but the mystical accent is the main one, but of books like The Spy, or for example, like The Strangers from Heidelberg, and the Foreigners from Heidelberg, and other books that he also published, because there is something like a continuity. If somebody would publish and translate his entire work, it can find that he don't only publish because he was inspired and he was a novel writer, but he has also a sociological purpose, as I've tried to prove in my book published in Peter Lang Press from Berlin in this year. And he published in order to protect the Romanians from the aggressions of the communism. Probably Mr. Gillyboeuf could tell you more, because he has also the letters of Father Gheorghiu. He is the testamentary legacy. And I must confess that when I wrote a book about the way how this conflict with Monica Lovinescu is reflected in Securitate Archives, he provided me, and not only the foreword, but very, very important documents. And I could confront what I found in the Securitate Archives with what he sent me. And I found, in fact, that the truth was not like Monica Lovinescu, who was an influential personality of the Romanian exile, tried to show it.
That's 5 or 6 lessons for us all together in one. And you sound like somebody who has recently written a dissertation.
I just published a PhD thesis in Berlin in this year. So I have graduated my second doctorate in 2021. So you're right.
Excellent. Now, I want to get Thierry's response to all of this. He's been putting some things in the chat, but just let me hold off on asking him to join in for just a moment or two. I guess a lesson for us in the West is totalitarianism can be so crushingly brutal that the best thing we can do is to do everything we can here and now to prevent it from coming to pass. We sometimes talk about here in the West a soft totalitarianism, and it has a real oppressiveness about it, but at least we can protest. And it seems to me a lesson that we should take from this historical experience that you've sketched is that we should speak up loudly and clearly here and now. Second thought that comes to mind is everything is what it is and not another thing, but we have the Ostpolitik that was adopted by Rome with regard to Eastern Europe, which was certainly, in my view, flawed. But we now have a certain accommodation in China on the part of the Vatican, which on my view is seriously flawed, but at the same time, there ought to be this awareness of just how grave the stakes are for the people who are in these countries. Well, that said, Thierry, could you offer your comments on what we've just heard? And you will have to unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm listening. What do you want me to do to answer?
To add, subtract, or clarify what Father Maxim has just been sharing with us.
As an inspiration for us now?
Yes. If you would like to develop the commentary that he's already presented us with.
I think that, I read the 25th hour when I was 15 for the first time, and I read it about 10 or 15 times in 10 years. And then I didn't read it for years, for more than 25 years. And I was invited for the centenary of his birth in Bucharest, and I said, I have to read it once again. And of course, I was a man of now. I was 50 at this time, and I was not sure the book was so moving as it was in my memory. But when I read it for the maybe 20 feet, I don't know how much times, but when I read it again, I discovered it was a masterpiece, and it's a very modern masterpiece. I think that 25th Hour, for example, and but some other novels as The Second Chance, for example, is as a big and important book as, for example, 1984 of George Orwell, of Brave New World, of Aldous Huxley, because this book is speaking of what happens in our time. And the petitions Traian Corrigan's writing when he's in camp is something of the best absurd literature, just like the same as Kafka, for example, or Dostoevsky. But in the case of Gheorghiu, there's something different and something maybe more. It's the part of the spirituality. He was a very deep man of spirituality, and this book about the Orthodox religion are very, very interesting. I'm a Christian, but I'm a Catholic, and I learn a lot about the Orthodox spirituality reading Gheorghiu. It opens my mind. And I think that Gheorghiu is, I still don't understand why this man is not read more than this. Because when I speak by chance with some people who read it many years ago, they all say it was such a book, he was such a writer, it is such a writer. Nobody understands why he's not one of the most known writers in the world. I mean, you can't find the 25th Hour in any bookshop in France. You have to order it, but you won't find it in any bookshop in France. I tried it many times, but you can't find it. So if you can't find the book, you can't read it. And and nobody's speaking of Gheorghiu now in France. It's completely forgotten. It's completely forgotten writer. I think this man, because he was against communists just in the Cold War, and because in France just after the war, communists were very, very strong and very, very actioning people. And just because he was communist, he was an enemy, but he was also an enemy because he was against the American way of life. So it can be, it doesn't belong to any camp of the Cold War. And that's I think that's the reason why that's the reason why someone writes a very, very different and very special. And his personal story is very moving. It's very typical of the history of the people of the east of Europe in the 20th century. For me, I think there's, for example, a very, very short book of Gheorghiu. The name is The Sacrifice of Danube, The Sacrifice du Danube in French. And it's a very, very short book. And it's just like a drama, but it could be Shakespeare. It's a novel. Huh? It could be a Shakespeare theater or a Greek theater, because it's about the human tragedy confronted with the history. And this is there are many many books of Gheorghiu was very, very, very who needs to be read, because they help you to understand our time. There are not books who belongs to 20th century. There are books who belongs to the whole human history, whole human modern history. I think that Gheorghiu is a witness of our time. That's the way he can help us. He's a witness of our time. And he was blacklisted because of the affair and the accusation in the beginning of the 50s. Yeah. And then he became a pope, became a priest, and of course, in the France of at the time of May 68, it was not the things to do. So it was sometimes an enemy, someone you despise, someone you fight against him. And after this, and he came back to the. It came back to the interest of many people when there was with the fall of Ceausescu, because he was someone who was always struggle against Ceausescu, and when Ceausescu failed, he was invited in all the newspapers and all the radio and TV, and was speaking because people were realizing that he was right about it. He told them for 50 years, and they realized that he was right. He was right about what the communism is. He was right about what happened in Romania, because the chief of the French Communist Party spent his holidays with Ceausescu, and Gheorghiu always told about it. The information we have about the Gheorghiu's file in the Securitat, thanks to the father Morariu, are very, very, very something very important for me. I learned a lot thanks to this file, because at the beginning was accused to be anti-Semite, and after this he was accused to be a spy for the Securitat. So he has always been an enemy. And when you're always an enemy of this kind of political power, it means that you're someone very, very dangerous, because you're dangerous because you understand what happens. And Gheorghiu helps us to see clearly what politics is.
Theoretically, we're at the end of the hour, but practice, I think, should take priority over theory. But I have to check, can you folks stay with us for a bit?
Yes.
I see nods. And Thierry, can you stay with us for a bit?
Yes.
Yeah. We're laughing at the chat here. Sebastian Mahfoud says till the end of the age. All right, let's keep going, and let's not worry about the time. First of all, Inez, can we hear from you again? So much has been said. I wonder if you'd like to interject some ideas. And after you've done that at your leisure, then I want to return to offer some other thoughts.
Yes, you mentioned that one of the things you wanted to address was the difference between the spiritual and the earthly.
Yes. Okay, that's one less thing that I'll have to discuss. Go ahead, please.
Yes, well, Thierry touched on this in the afterword, his really great afterword to the Condottiera, about how Gheorghiu, the novels, rooted in the earth, but lifted up to heaven. And I think you see that in the difference between the Akathist brothers, the priest, Father Theophorus, and his brother Nicholas. His brother Nicholas likes everything that has to do with the earth. He's very practical. And Father Theophorus is of an almost ethereal spirituality, who hardly seems like he's made of flesh and blood, who fasts, who has long prayer vigils, but they appreciate each other and love each other very much. So I guess that would be one point I would want to make.
And yet, even in Western monasticism, we have the idea of ora et labora, and we have in this ecologically aware time a deep appreciation of the Benedictine orders, a commitment to the place they are in and building it and developing it. And in Alistair MacIntyre's famous After Virtue, at the end, we have him saying, well, we could go in a Trotsky direction, in which he had flirted with at some time, or we could wait for a new Benedict. And it seems to me that there, even within monasticism, there needn't be such a sharp split. But that's a matter for discussion. Would you like to tackle the whole question of the place of the woman in La Condottiera? On the one hand, we have the Blessed Mother, a woman who is the guide, and then we have the woman on earth, Sabina, who is someone that the monk is afraid even to look at. And the poet, for all his wonderful poetry, is at one point at least, making sexual advances towards. I wonder if you'd like to discuss that, the place of the woman.
Me? Well,
I think you're the best one.
I think Sabina has to be understood in the context of what's happened to her. She's lost her husband, she lost the mill, and she's very, very upset. And she feels responsible for the murder of her husband, which of course she's not. And then there's Ovid Panteleimon, the poet, who has been living more or less in a closet. Gheorghiu satirizes things, he exaggerates to make a point. So he's been living in this closet, and he escapes, and he comes into contact with Sabina, and it's like he hasn't heard the voice of a woman for so long, and he can't help himself. She herself realizes he's not in his right mind. And then you have Father Theophorus, who has a certain fear of contact with the feminine, because for a monk, it can be threatening. He needs to live his celibate life, and perhaps this is somewhat exaggerated, but it's understandable that he understands how wonderful a woman is. He understands that she's the most beautiful creature of God, but he has his ascetic, contemplative life to protect. So all this is written in a kind of expressionist way.
Yes.
But I think in a very poetic way, when Father Theophorus the communists cruelly locked them up in the same cell, and it's like a torture. And Father Theophorus comes to terms with, and he helps Sabina. He sees that his role is to be a spiritual father to her, and he encourages her to accept whatever lies ahead, even if it be death. So they do have, in the end, a very appropriate spiritual relationship.
Thank you for that. That's certainly helpful. Let me offer a couple more points here, and then I'll encourage everybody to jump in again. With regard to the neglect of our author, Gheorghiu, there is, and I think our friend Father Maxim would be very attuned to this, a kind of systematic disregard for all things Central European in the West. There's a kind of snobbery. We have a real ignorance of the history of Central Europe and Eastern Europe. And I think that explains in part the neglect here. And then also Thierry mentioned the distance that Gheorghiu put between himself and the West. Consider in like fashion Solzhenitsyn. Solzhenitsyn was lionized in the West when he was seen as, first and foremost, a dissenter against the communism which he had once himself accepted. But lo and behold, when Solzhenitsyn comes to the West and tells the West the truth about the West, he's shunted, he's put aside, he's seen as somebody hopelessly cranky and idiosyncratic and negative and all of that. So there certainly is a parallel in the treatment of those two. Well, those are the things that I wanted to mention. Would any of you like to add or clarify or extend, since we all have a little extra time? Thierry, you're coming from Paris, and well, last week on this program, we got to talk to somebody from South Africa, and we thought that was pretty good. And now somebody from Paris, that's great too. What else would you like to add?
To everything you say. There's something. Unfortunately, I haven't spoken a lot of spirituality in Gheorghiu. I say, as I understand the meeting, it was maybe the point where you wanted to speak of. But I think that Father Morariu and Inez would speak better than me about this. As I told you, for my now 14 years, I'm the owner of the rights of Gheorghiu's works. It's a chance. It's hazard. It's a very long story. I don't have time to explain it. But I think it's for me. It's a mission for me. I want I'm trying to do my best to make Gheorghiu's more and more rediscovered. And I'm very grateful to people like Father Morariu, like Inez. All of them were doing the same and trying to make him more read and more discovered by new generations of readers. I really wanted to do this. I'm trying to issue his unpublished books. I have 2 novels and 3 novels in France who have not been issued in France, and a biography of Saint Ambrosius of Milano. He wrote something the same way he wrote a biography of, I don't know the name in English, Saint Jean Chrysostomos. And I wanted to this book to be issued in France because they are very important in Gheorghiu works. But I want to write a better biography than the short one I did. And I would like, what I want to do is a very, very complete book about the Gheorghiu affair, because thanks to Father Morariu, I have now the secreted file on Gheorghiu. I have all the personal archives in my home, the personal archives of Gheorghiu, with many unpublished and unknown documents, were letters by Monica Lovinescu, by Mircea Eliade, by Gabriel Marcel. Because when there was the affair Gheorghiu, Gabriel Marcel took back the foreword he wrote for the 25th hour and made a public clash with Gheorghiu. But some years after, and nobody knows about this, some years after, he came back to Gheorghiu and apologized for what he did. So I want to make this book about the affair, but not because of Gheorghiu, but I think it's a way of understanding what happens in half of the European continent during more than half of the century, the 20th century. I think that the way the West despised those people who fled the East European, I want to. It's very. I think it's kind of memory testimony, historical testimonies, something very important. That's what I'm trying to do now. I'm trying to manage for a book, because Father Morariu asked me the book about everything Gheorghiu wrote about religious matters in the newspapers. I have found many documents about this, but I have to still looking all the documents I own, and I haven't finished yet. But there are many faces of Gheorghiu. I wanted to make know to understand better this man, because this man is someone very, very interesting, and it's not only for me. It's not only a writer. I personally met him and spent some time with him, and I was very close to his widow for years. So it's something for me very personal, and maybe I'm too enthusiastic about what he works or about his works and the man, but I'm sure of my taste. I'm sure of what I read. I'm sure of what his value is in the literary field, and I want him to get back the place he has his place in literature. That's my mission for the years to come.
We look forward to your great work, and God give you the strength to carry it through. Father Maxim, your final thoughts, and let them be as compendious as you wish.
Well, I'm not sure that I would be able to comprise all my thoughts in a few minutes, but I will try. First of all, I really enjoyed both of the interventions of Mr. Gillyboeuf and also of Miss Inez. But to Mr. Gillyboeuf, I'm owning an answer. At a certain point when I worked on the Gheorghiu affair, he asked me, was he guilty or not? And I avoided to answer him. Now, after so many digging in the archives and so many research done, I can answer him clearly, yes, he was not guilty in the Gheorghiu affair. He was something that was prepared by Monica Lovinescu. And I'm sorry that at the time, as a historian, I was not able to, at the time, to be, because we are always called to be honest and to be objective in the approach. On the other side, we must underline what Mr. Gillyboeuf said, that Gheorghiu wrote about the communism and denounced the crimes of the communists with an accent before Solzhenitsyn, before all the other writers who started to write about this. Yes. And the sad part was that he was somehow put at the wall by the Romanian writers, because being so influent in the Romanian exile from Paris, Lovinescu family somehow managed to put everybody to be against him. You know, it was and somehow still is in certain points in Romanian space. If you're not with us, you are against us. And this is the saddest part of Father Gheorghiu's biography, because excepting Cioran, who would later join the ones who will become his detractors, Gheorghiu was also criticized by people like Eliade, who was jealous on his success. And I will show you, if you want, this notice by Sanda Stolojan, who was the official translator of President de Gaulle. And she was very close both to Cioran and to Eliade family. And this was the sad part. And that's why I'm happy to underline the fact that in Romania, if you go today, you will find 25th Hour together with all the books of Gheorghiu published by one of the most important Romanian houses. Unfortunately, not all of them have an introductory studies that come to speaks about the real relevance of the water, but some of them, yes, because I remember now, for example, the man who was traveling alone with a foreword by Thierry Gillyboeuf, who is welcome this foreword because it comes to speak about the role of the work in the entire architecture of the entire work of Gheorghiu. And yeah, I think it's important to publish all the documents that we have. I must thank to Mr. Gillyboeuf, because when I published in 2021 a book about this conflict reflected in Securitate dossiers, in the Securitate documents, one of the points that helped me really, one of the most important pieces of the puzzle were the two letters that he sent me, and that they are the letters of Monica Lovinescu to Virgil Gheorghiu from 51, if I remember well, when she confesses that she received money. Monica Lovinescu, in front of the judge, in front of the authorities of France, she never recognized that she never confessed that she received money, and she received more than 15% from the copyrights. She received about 31%, if I remember well. So she was not honest with the judge, and somehow from the point of the view of a man who represents the Romanian culture, I think this is not good, not fair. So for this reason, among others, we need to rediscover. On the other side, at the level of the writing, Gheorghiu is one of the deepest writers that the world had in the 20th century. I'm not a writer, or if I am a writer, I'm just an amateur compared with somebody like Gheorghiu. He managed so well to valorize both the Romanian spirituality, the Romanian culture and tradition, and at the same time, the way of how the international, the Occident, managed to influence this tradition, at the same time, the way how the Occident has its own tradition and how we can interact. His main error with the commas, I would say, was that he never affiliated to a certain way of life or ideology of a political regime. He criticized both Nazis, both communist, and both American capitalism. And for this reason, today I think he's somehow isolated. But it is a pity to not see the biographies that he dedicated to Luther, to Mohammed, his relationship with Athenagoras, the patriarch of the Greeks, the ecumenical patriarch. His biography is dedicated to the science, or works like Condottiera, which have a deep ecumenical relevance. At the time, sized both by people like Charles Westphal or by a lot of theologians like from the Catholic space. I remember in 2015, I was in the Benedictine Abbey. I graduated to the Dominicans, Father Sebastian. I graduated to the Pontifical University of the Dominicans in Rome, in Thomas Aquinas. But in the same time, I had a few months when I lived to the Benedictines, because my bishop at the time sent me there to live among the Benedictines. And the Benedictines were very impressed by Gheorghiu. The Dominicans knew also his work because they encouraged me to write a PhD thesis dedicated to him. But I was very impressed to see what impact had his ecumenical openness in France, for example, among the Benedictines and the Dominicans and the religious that known him. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Inez, you made all of this possible. You did the translation and you brought with you Thierry and Father Maxim, to whom we are enormously indebted. So could you give us some final thoughts? And don't rush.
Well, I feel very blessed having read so many of Gheorghiu's works. I like his spirituality, most of all, that the supernatural is real. For example, I think it's in La Condottiera, somebody says, oh, he has a little anecdote, it might be from the Church Fathers, where someone says, oh, somebody died. And a monk says, no, people don't die. They pass on to the next life. So that's what I like the most about him, that his faith goes into the very fibers of his being and is in all his work. And of course, I like the criticism of capitalism. He was very prescient. He saw that in the capitalistic, materialistic system, man became like a clog in a machine. And this is pointed out in a very satirical way in The American Eye, which is kind of a work of science fiction about American domination of the whole world. So I can resonate with that, and the fact that we don't have any political system here, we don't have any way to go forward in the United States. I guess I can appreciate his criticism, and I wish that the American Solidarity Party had more traction. I think Gheorghiu would have liked its way of being pro-life, pro-environment, pro-peace, pro-worker. He might have found the third way there that never materialized for him.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the mention of the American Solidarity Party. We're going to get more traction. We just need more feet on the ground, nonviolent feet on the ground. I'm going to close, as we always do, with the gospel for today. And this is from the Gospel of John. Since the Passover of the Jews was near, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. He found in the temple area those who sold oxen, sheep, and doves, as well as the money changers seated there. He made a whip out of cords and drove them all out of the temple area with the sheep and oxen, and spilled the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And to those who sold doves, he said, "Take these out of here and stop making my Father's house a marketplace." His disciples recalled the words of Scripture, "Zeal for your house will consume me." At this, the Jews answered and said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" Jesus answered them and said, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews said, "This temple has been under construction for 46 years, and you will raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking about the temple of his body. Therefore, when he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they came to believe the Scripture and the word Jesus had spoken. Come, Lord Jesus, come. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Our visitors from afar, thank you so much. Inez, thank you so much for getting this all organized.
Oh, thank you, Jim, for hosting it.
And Sebastian Mahfoud, our producer, will edit and put everything together. And usually within a couple of days, he'll send us the finished product, which, of course, when people connect with it, we'll see it's an unfinished product. There's more to be done. And as our Archbishop says here in Los Angeles, siempre adelante con juicio, always forward with judgment. Godspeed.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.